Rain is steadily pushing in from the north. We'll have showers across north-east Scotland through the day, and some will graze these eastern counties of England, where there's a pretty chilly and brisk wind blowing along those North Sea coasts. One or two scattered showers elsewhere, and a bit more cloud coming into West Wales later. But as I said, for many, dry and bright. It isn't warm, though. It's chilly out there this morning, and temperatures struggling, maybe in the teens in London, but 6 or 7 degrees for most of the day in Northern Ireland. That's going to feel pretty chilly. Some of that rain from Northern Ireland will get into parts of South Wales and South West England this evening, so it's turning a little damp here. Still a few showers through the night across East Anglia and parts of Kent and the far north of Scotland. But for most, it's a dry night, a clear night. Pretty chilly one again, temperatures well down into single figures. Pockets of frost likely for Wales, the Midlands and northern England, certainly in rural areas. We will see quite a bit of sunshine on Thursday morning across the southern half of the UK, but clouding over through the night and for the morning across Scotland and Northern Ireland, and further outbreaks of rain pushing in here. Quite a wet day actually for western Scotland. Increasingly blustery here as well. But further south, the winds will be light. Yes, it'll cloud over a little bit, but with some sunshine, we should again get up to 13 degrees.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Was the Prime Minister on the right side of history last night with that vote to give us the toughest anti-smoking laws in the world, or is it a vote against freedom?
And smoking and smacking. Should you be allowed to smack your own kids? We're going to be debating that.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. The M53 in Cheshire is blocked southbound where a car's overturned between junctions 10 and 11 towards the M56. There are queues from junction 5 at Eastham. In Merthyr Tydfil, the A465 heads of the Valleys roads closed eastbound from the Dystop roundabout. The Rimney interchange because of animals on the road causing queues. On the A48M in Cardiff, the outside lanes closed southbound at St Mellons. Emergency barrier repairs after an accident earlier. Now in London, there are long delays on the A2 each way because of roadworks on Blackheath Hill. Trains have been stopped between Uckfield and East Croydon for track safety checks, and in West Sussex the A23 is blocked southbound after an accident where a car caught fire at Hand Cross. There are queues from Pease Pottage and long delays as you divert. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
There is a kind of a Mediterranean side to that as well, because my mother came from that side, you know, a big family. And I think there is that sense of community where family is kind of key. And I think that's really kind of what we sort of try and continue, really. I mean, certainly with children and stuff like that, you know, Sunday lunches were always, you know, the big thing.
Yeah,
really.
But if you go down the Old Kent Road today...
Very different. Very different, yeah. And that was quite some time ago as well, because we were very close to where the Thomas à Becket was.
Yeah, I know, the boxing upstairs and all the rest of it. Yep.
And I did go down there not so long ago, actually, and it really is very, very different. I mean, I'm not saying that's necessarily bad. I think we have a different view of things.
Most people in London, Nicky, don't even know the names of the next-door neighbours.
No, true.
We've completely lost that sense of community that you grew up with, that you knew. I think it's a real problem.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say sometimes I'm a bit guilty of it where I am now as well. You live in big houses, and I do see my neighbours, but, you know, it's not quite the same as it was back.
But I guess from that background, you're a teenager, you want to become a hairdresser.
Yeah,
that must have been quite a difficult call.
Yeah, that one was a really good call. My dad went, oh, God, what? I mean, it was just very funny. And certainly from the point of view of, you know, this was the early 70s. And so it wasn't really the kind of the choice of most people would do.
No, but you did. Why?
I don't know, actually. I mean, I went to a grammar school and I didn't do as well in the final exams, and I was kind of forced into sort of leaving. And you suddenly go, ooh, no idea what to do here, really. Yeah. But the idea of doing something in fashion, and, you know, I really kind of... I know that I was given some really good advice, actually, by somebody that said, just start at the bottom. Don't necessarily go to, you know, college or whatever. Not that there may not be anything wrong with those, but just start at the bottom, go to the best place you can and start sweeping the floor.
Morning, 9:30 on Wednesday, the 17th of April. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Very good morning. So, Tories were split on the smoking ban. Rishi Sunak's flagship bill passes the first hurdle, but there was division over it within his party.
And is it time to ban smacking? Paediatricians want to outlaw smacking children in England and Northern Ireland to keep it in line with Scotland and Wales. Don't we need this to discipline our kids, or is it outdated and cruel? What do you think?
And a victory for all schools. That's how Britain's strictest head teacher, Catherine Birbalsingh, describes the High Court ruling that her prayer ban is lawful.
Free speech imperil. Nigel Farage condemns the cancel culture in Brussels, of all places, after police tried to shut down the National Conservatism Conference, where he was speaking.
Free speech prevails in Brussels. The NatCon conference is on today too now. Nigel Farage's arrival is imminent.
And inflation is down. It fell to 3.2% in the year to March, down from 3.4%. Here's the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak.
Today's figures show that our economic plan is working and inflation continues to fall. Having been 11% when I became Prime Minister, it's now fallen to just over 3%, the lowest level in 2.5 years.
That smacking debate is going to get you wound up, I'm sure.
Because in Scotland and Wales, it's already banned. But as one who was smacked by my mum a lot, how do you enforce it?
Well, the problem is, what you will find is that children will then snitch on their parents, children who might be just from the goodness of their heart, for the wanting those kids to behave better, might lightly smack their children. The children will then turn around to the parents and say, you can't do that, I'll call the police. It's awful. Division, it's anti-family.
Well, I'd have got another smack for that.
Well, exactly. But unfortunately, now they've all got mobile phones.
Yeah.
So then they would just ring the police. It's not the right move, in my opinion.
Of course, there was no childline when we were kids.
Well, listen, gbnews.com/your say, and I know you will have your say on that and all of our topics this morning. First, though, the very latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you and good morning. The top stories. The rate of inflation's fallen to its lowest level in 2.5 years, which the Prime Minister says shows the government's plan is working. Figures from the Office for National Statistics shows it eased to 3.2% in March, compared to 3.4% the month before. Economists say a dip in food prices is the main reason for the slowdown. Furniture and household goods prices also contributed to the fall. The Governor of the Bank of England has signalled the UK is still on course for an interest rate cut despite the news. Rishi Sunak says today's inflation figures are part of a brighter economic picture.
We've also seen mortgage rates fall, energy bills fall, and data this week showed that wages have been rising faster than inflation for 9 months in a row. Now, because of all of that, we've been able to cut people's taxes, a £900 tax cut for the average worker, and increase the state pension by £900 this month. That all shows that our plan is working, and my simple message would be, if we stick to that plan, people can have confidence that there's a brighter future ahead.
Smacking children should be made illegal in England and Northern Ireland, according to children's doctors. The Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health says the current law in England and Northern Ireland has created grey areas, which mean there's sometimes a defence to physical punishment. Their report warns children suffer lasting mental and physical effects from being hit in the home. Striking a child is already illegal in Scotland and Wales and in many other countries around the world. Paedophiles convicted of serious sexual offences could lose parental rights over their children. A proposed law change would stop offenders being able to decide where their children go to school, as well as important health and travel choices. Only the most serious sexual offence, rape of a child under 13, would be covered under the new rule. However, Labour MP Harriet Harman says the rule could be extended to cover less serious sexual offences against children in the future. Lord Cameron says more can and should be done to sanction Iran following its attack on Israel during his trip there. The Foreign Secretary arrived in Israel this morning for talks with Benjamin Netanyahu as the Israeli Prime Minister considers his response to Iran's missile and drone attack. David Cameron's expected to echo Rishi Sunak's calls for calm heads, but also told reporters that Tehran needs to be given a clear and unequivocal message by world leaders. It comes after the Prime Minister told his Israeli counterpart significant escalation is in no one's interest, in a caution over the crisis in the Middle East. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Good morning. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Well, it was a big, big moment. We've now got the first stage, anyway, of the parliamentary process to give us the toughest anti-smoking laws in the world, but 165 Tory MPs, it's almost half, either voted against or abstained, even though this is the Rishi Sunak's flagship bill. It was a free vote.
It was. So the Prime Minister did get his plans through with the support of Labour MPs across the House. 383 voted for the ban and 67 were against it.
So the bill would make it illegal to sell cigarettes to anyone born in 2009 or later. And, of course, many Tories say anti-freedom, we shouldn't be banning things. And if you start banning fags, what about alcohol? Where do we go next?
Right. Well, joining us now is a Conservative MP for Rayleigh and Wickford, Mark Francois. Good morning, Mark. Good to see you. Why did you vote against this idea?
I voted against it on principle because I don't believe in the nanny state. And I don't believe that it was right for the government to legislate on this question. I believe whether or not people want to smoke, and we're all well aware that there are health consequences of doing it, should be a matter for individual decision by individual people. We like to tell the rest of the world we live in a free country. Well, the direction of travel of this measure was going in the other direction.
But maybe it's just that cigarettes, nicotine is a very outdated product. If it was to appear on the market today, we would never legalise such a drug. And maybe this is just moving with the times. I've got 2 children born after 2009. And I must say, there's a little bit of me is quite relieved that they'll never be able to go into a shop and buy a cigarette.
Well, that should be their decision. I mean, I go out door knocking twice a month in my patch. Andrew and I have discussed this before. So I don't just, I go and ask my constituents what they're thinking. And because of the local elections, it's been a bit more than that. Often the NHS crops up on the doorstep. But I've never had a constituent ever raise this with me and say they wanted me to vote for a smoking ban. It's never happened. So there's no clamour from my constituents, certainly not that I'm aware of as of to this moment, to vote for this ban. I've had a handful of emails about it either way. And if you look at the result last night, it was extraordinary. There are 180 Tory MPs who voted for the ban, but 165 who didn't. There were 59 who voted against it, of whom I was one. But even more importantly, 106 Tory MPs abstained. I mean, the Prime Minister was quite right to make it a free vote. It's, it's traditionally what you might call conscience issues are unwhipped. That was the correct decision. But to have over 100 Tory MPs abstain on what's meant to be a flagship measure is extraordinary. And when you're having to rely on Labour votes to get through what is meant to be flagship legislation, that is an extremely uncomfortable position to be in. So for me, the story of last night is not so much the 59 who voted against, but including some members of the cabinet, it's the 106 who abstained.
What would you say, though, Mark, and I appreciate where you're coming from on this, to those parents who are watching this programme or listening on the radio, or grandparents who think they want the government to do anything they can to make it more difficult for teenagers to get into smoking? And they would argue that that's exactly what the vote last night did, also limiting teen access to vapes as well.
Yes, but those teenagers will grow up. So, I think the legislation will be unworkable. I mean, picture a scene some years from now when someone goes into a newsagent somewhere in Britain and the person behind the counter says, Are you 35 or 36? I can't quite tell by looking at you. You know, and you want to buy 20 cigarettes. Do you happen to have your birth certificate on you?
We'll have your biometric ID by then, Mark.
No, I just think this will be practically unworkable. If the bill had said that it would tighten up on the sale of vapes to children underage, I would gladly have voted for it.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, I don't think it's right that, you know, kids of 12 or 13, you know, should be able to go into a shop and, you know, buy vapes under the counter, as it were. I would gladly have voted for that. But that's a very different proposition from saying that some years from now, someone who's 35, you know, won't be allowed to buy some cigarettes, but someone who's 36 will. If you actually look at the legislation, you know, there's an old saying in Parliament: hard cases make for bad law. And I just can't see how, in the real world, outside of the Westminster bubble, this legislation's actually going to work.
But do you suspect, Mark, look, we've got a Prime Minister who, if the polls are correct, is leading your party to a very heavy defeat later this year. Do you suspect this may be something to do with his own personal legacy? What will his premiership be remembered for? He can at least then say, well, I introduced what some are describing as the most draconian, toughest anti-smoking law in the country. He's got a leader in the Times saying today, Rishi Sunak is on the right side of history, you guys are on the wrong side.
Well, in that case, let history be the judge.
It's quite a brag, isn't it, to be the most draconian Prime Minister in history?
Well, I think the measure is unconservative. You know, we're meant to be the party of individual liberty. Margaret Thatcher believed in a free society under a rule of law. But I think this is a law which will be, in reality, practically unenforceable.
But Mark, just a bit of a pressing question I've got to ask you. Given how many people from the Conservatives went against the Prime Minister or abstained on his flagship policy, you've got the wrong Prime Minister.
We've got local elections in 2.5 weeks. And let's see what the results of those elections are. You know, that's not an opinion poll by a polling company. Those are real votes in real ballot boxes. And let's see what happens in those elections, and maybe we'll have a discussion after that on, you know, what the results are. What we do know is there was a vote in the House of Commons last night. The division lists are published. You know, we live in a country where people can see the following morning how their individual member of Parliament voted on whatever Parliament, and that's a good thing, right? There are some countries on earth where you can't even do that. So, you know, we all have to stand by the decisions that we make, and the public can see how we voted. Last night, 165 Conservative MPs chose not to support the Prime Minister's flagship legislation. So, you know, if I were in number 10, I would be a bit concerned about that. And I'd say, well, maybe we need to listen a little bit better to what people on the backbenches are trying to tell us.
All right, Mark, just before I let you go, I noticed that the cabinet ministers who voted against, Braverman, sorry, she's not a cabinet minister now, but Badenoch, cabinet minister, widely seen as a future Tory leadership contender. Suella Braverman voted against, widely seen as a future leadership contender. Robert Jenrick, another one. Penny Mordaunt, leadership contender. She's in the cabinet. She abstained. Priti Patel, could run for the leadership. She abstained. And we mustn't forget Liz Truss voted against. Are these people limbering up for after what happens on May the 2nd?
Look, I was in the No lobby last night, Andrew, and I saw a number of these people come through. They were voting last night on whether or not to introduce this, to my mind, illiberal measure. That's what happened last night. Let's not read too much more into it. Let's wait and see what happens in the local elections. But last night, the Prime Minister got through, he won the vote, a flagship measure, but he had to rely on a large number of Labour votes in order to do it. And that is not a comfortable position for any Conservative Prime Minister, whoever they happen to be.
Mark, there's a group, talking of the nanny state, there's a group of paediatricians who are calling for a nationwide rollout of a smacking ban so that parents can't physically discipline their children, no matter how loving or mild that might be. Do you support it?
I'm instinctively wary of it for similar reasons to the ones that we have been discussing. But I would like to see the detail of that. I've learned, having been an MP for 23 years now, when people ask you to vote on a piece of legislation, it's often a good idea to actually look at the legislation first, because
How old-fashioned of you.
I'm so sorry. Yes, forgive me. I am a bit of a square on that one. When people say we have this on Brexit all the time, will you vote for this? Will you vote for that? Well, if you just allow me the opportunity to read it, that would be quite handy.
Well, at this stage, it's just a proposal from a group of paediatricians.
I've given you my instinct on it. But I'd actually, if we're going to vote on it, and again, I think that should be a free vote if it comes to it, then I'd actually want to be able to look at what precisely is proposed.
Were you smacked as a child, Mark? We were.
Explains a lot about her.
I don't think I was, actually. But my mother was Italian. So she had other ways of expressing her displeasure. She used to talk to me in English. But if she switched into Italian, I knew that meant cease and desist. That was her disciplinary measure.
Cease and desist. Mark, Francois, thank you so much. Cease and desist. That's brilliant. That's what parents are doing all over the country every day, and sometimes with various levels of success. Right, we are going to be discussing that after the break. Doctors are calling for smacking of children to be banned in England and Northern Ireland. It's already illegal in Scotland and Wales, isn't it?
It is.
So governments. Let us know your thought. This is GB News.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Mark White was saying there, Sue, that he thinks it's getting worse, and you were nodding along to that. You've seen this over decades. Situation is sprawling along the coast, more people, and the danger is ramping up.
Definitely, because the numbers and the money it's run like a military operation. I mean, I've been told that by the National Crime Agency, and I don't need to be told it by them to know it. It is meticulous, because there's so much money involved. So they're marshalling migrants here, the gangs, they're controlling the gangs, and there will be a kingpin. In some city far away in Erbil, or even in Paris, or in Brussels, who never goes anywhere near the beaches. It's like a Ponzi scheme, really.
Yeah. With that in mind, there's such vested interest, such money, such demand, a never-ending string of demand of people who want to come here.
People are already on their way, remember?
Yeah.
If we stop them now, they're already leaving. There's people leaving the Sudan now are going to reach the only place they want to get to, the French beaches, to get to the UK. They'll arrive in 2.5 years' time.
And so,
you see, they're on their way.
If it's that organised, that lucrative, that desirable, how on earth do we ever break that chain?
It sounds incredibly harsh, but I think if the EU change politically in the June elections, which I think it probably will, I think they will put up, as the Greeks have done, holding camps all over Europe, the coasts of Europe, where people are assessed, just to see who is coming in, which would be a plus, as the Greeks have done, because we have no idea who is coming in.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. Is it ever OK to smack your children?
Well, I'm not a parent, of course, but I was smacked as a child, and I don't think it did me too much damage, although some people may say it explains a lot. It certainly does with Beverly, who was smacked quite a lot, apparently.
My mum had
Your mum would be watching.
Yeah, she's
I sort of
watching.
guess I know why you have to smack her so often, Mum.
Do you know, she would agree. But my mum had a philosophy. She worked with children her whole life. She didn't smack other people's children, to be clear. But her philosophy was lots of discipline, smacking when necessary, but twice as many cuddles. So for every smack we might have got, it's not like she was throwing us around the room, for every little smack on the legs we might have got for being cheeky or for running across the road when we weren't supposed to, or that kind of thing, or touching a hot pan, you would get twice as many cuddles.
OK, well, doctors, we're talking about this because doctors are calling for it, paediatricians calling for it to be banned in England and Northern Ireland. It's already illegal in Scotland and Wales, where the devolved governments say parents are trusted to just... parents cannot smack their children.
That's right. So, to debate this, we're joined by broadcasters Anna May Mangan and Emma Wolfe. Good morning, ladies. Anna, let me start with you. I think you have 4 children, do you? And also some grandchildren. How do you discipline them?
I speak to them. I mean, I think it's uncivilised that we're even discussing this as a maybe it shouldn't happen. Why would you brutalise a small child to get them to do what you want to do? Try that with your boss or your partner or your neighbour who parked in the wrong place and you give them a whack. And all this chat about a little tap. If it's a little tap, why bother? Speak to them. It really doesn't need to use violence. And if the parents who allow themselves to smack their children, I'm sure they'd go crazy if they went visiting and another mother hit their children. So is it about ownership? You can smack the person you love most in all the world, but nobody else can. So a teacher, obviously, you wouldn't want them to smack your children or anybody else in the family. It's wrong. It's teaching them that violence sorts out problems, and it doesn't.
Anna May, you're using the word violence. A smack on the legs, I wouldn't call that violence.
OK, does it depend who's delivering it and how big the proportion is? So say someone 3 times bigger than you walked into the studio now and gave you a cuff on the back of the head. They'd be much stronger than you. And who's to define what's violent? The fact that you use your hands and force to persuade a child to do or not to do something, it just makes no sense to me. I don't even see how we can be debating this.
Emma,
it's so obviously wrong.
I think, Emma, for me, that argument ignores the very special relationship that a parent has with a child. Emma, go on, just respond to that.
Absolutely. I think using words like brutalise and violence is really, really unhelpful here. I think there is a place for loving, mild, physical discipline in rare occasions, in an emergency situation, when necessary. I do not think that we are talking about slapping or physically harming a child. I'm talking about a tap on the leg or on the bottom or on the back of the thigh when you do something dangerous, like running into the road, things that I did as a child, once in a very, very occasional while. That is... And
I think Emma's line is just breaking up a little bit, Anna. We'll bring you back in on that.
I just want to
go
say,
on, just respond to what Emma said.
You talk about a special relation. Oh, sorry, go on.
Go on, Anna.
A special relationship. I think a lot of parents who smack their children, and it is a smack. If you lay your hands on a child, it's a smack. To try and force them to do something, because that's what it's about. Would these parents do it in public? The majority of them not. So that tells me that there's a problem with it already. Do you really want siblings who are disciplined by smacking to deal with each other in that way as well? When is it okay for a sibling to smack each other around the face? It's not. So let's just be civilised.
It's not okay for siblings to do it, but it is natural. It is what children do.
No, it's not.
And it is exactly what children do.
Adults don't do it.
No, adults don't do it, but I think
you're teaching them.
But there are very different rules apply to adults in the world and apply to children.
And there shouldn't be. 60% of people in a study done by the NSPCC agree with me that it shouldn't happen. And now the College of Paediatricians are coming out. I mean, what more do you need to outlaw this and to make it wrong, to make it formally wrong?
OK. All right, Anna May Mangan, Emma Wolfe, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
I trust a sensible parent. I don't need paediatricians to tell parents what to do.
No, don't go anywhere. GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar. sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Many of us will have a fine, bright day today with some sunshine. Still going to be pretty gusty across the east with a fair few showers, and it is going to turn damp in Northern Ireland. A dry start, but the cloud and rain is steadily pushing in from the north. We'll have showers across northeast Scotland through the day, and some will graze these eastern counties of England, where there's a pretty chilly and brisk wind blowing along those North Sea coasts. One or two scattered showers elsewhere, and a bit more cloud coming into West Wales later. But as I said, for many, dry and bright. It isn't warm, though. It's chilly out there this morning, and temperatures struggling, maybe in the teens in London, but 6 or 7 degrees for most of the day in Northern Ireland. That's going to feel pretty chilly. Some of that rain from Northern Ireland will get into parts of South Wales and South West England this evening, so it's turning a little damp here. Still a few showers through the night across East Anglia and parts of Kent and the far north of Scotland. But for most, it's a dry night, a clear night. Pretty chilly one again, temperatures well down into single figures. Pockets of frost likely for Wales, the Midlands and northern England, certainly in rural areas. We will see quite a bit of sunshine on Thursday morning across the southern half of the UK, but clouding over through the night and for the morning across Scotland and Northern Ireland, and further outbreaks of rain pushing in here. Quite a wet day actually for western Scotland. Increasingly blustery here as well, but further south the winds will be light. Yes, it'll cloud over a little bit, but with some sunshine we should again get up to 13 degrees.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. On the M8 in Glasgow, the outside lane's closed eastbound where someone's broken down at junction 22 for the M77. There are queues from junction 24 at Govan. Delays too back along the M77 towards there. The M65 in Lancashire is partly blocked eastbound by an accident at junction 4 south of Blackburn, causing queues. The M53 in Cheshire is blocked southbound where a car's overturned between junctions 10 and 11 towards the M56 with queues from junction 5 at Eastham. On the M5 in Worcestershire, the northbound entry slip road's closed at junction 8 from the M50 because of an accident. In Merthyr Tydfil, the A465 heads of the Valleys roads closed eastbound from the Dollis Top roundabout to the Rimney interchange after an accident with queues towards there. And in West Sussex, the A23 is blocked southbound where a car caught fire at Hand Cross with queues from Pease Pottage. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Very Very good morning. It's 10 o'clock on Wednesday, the 17th of April. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Well, they're split on the smoking ban. Rishi Sunak's flagship bill passes its first Commons hurdle. But is this the nanny state going too far?
Is it time to ban smacking? Paediatricians want to outlaw smacking children in England and Northern Ireland to bring the countries in line with Scotland and Wales.
And victory for all our schools. That's how Britain's so-called strictest head teacher, Catherine Birbalsingh, described a High Court ruling that her prayer ban is lawful.
And is free speech in desperate peril? Nigel Farage has hit out at cancel culture in Brussels after police attempted to shut down the National Conservatism Conference, where day 2 is now underway.
Nigel Farage has arrived at day 2 of the NatCon conference, where free speech will prevail after the Supreme Court struck down a ruling to end this event.
And inflation is down. It fell slightly from 3.4% to 3.2% in the year to March. This is the Prime Minister's verdict.
Today's figures show that our economic plan is working and inflation continues to fall. Having been 11% when I became Prime Minister, it's now fallen to just over 3%, the lowest level in 2.5 years.
We've also got award-winning novelist, brilliant writer Lionel Shriver is going to be in the studio with us to talk about all these big issues, which very much centre on her belief system at the moment. GBNews.com/your say is the message board. So let us know what you think. But first, the very latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you. The top stories this morning. The rate of inflation has fallen to its lowest level in 2.5 years, which the Prime Minister says shows the government's plan is working. Figures from the Office for National Statistics shows it eased to 3.2% in March, compared to 3.4% the month before. Economists say a dip in food prices is the main reason for the slowdown. Rishi Sunak says today's inflation figures are part of a brighter economic picture.
We've also seen mortgage rates fall, energy bills fall, and data this week showed that wages have been rising faster than inflation for 9 months in a row. Now, because of all of that, we've been able to cut people's taxes, a £900 tax cut for the average worker, and increase the state pension by £900 this month. That all shows that our plan is working, and my simple message would be, if we stick to that plan, people can have confidence that there's a brighter future ahead.
Smacking children should be made illegal in England and Northern Ireland, according to children's doctors. The Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health says the current law has created grey areas, which means there's sometimes a defence to physical punishment. Their report warns children suffer lasting mental and physical effects from being hit in the home. Striking a child is already illegal in Scotland and Wales and in many other countries around the world. The highest court in Belgium has ruled the National Conservatism Conference can continue without further disruption from authorities. It comes after police arrived while Nigel Farage was addressing the event yesterday, giving everyone 15 minutes to leave the venue. Belgium's Prime Minister described the actions as unacceptable and unconstitutional. Here, Downing Street said the attempt by police in Brussels to shut down the conference was extremely disturbing. Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Laura Trott, told GB News that democracy must be defended.
You absolutely need to defend that. You have to be able to be on a platform generally with people that you disagree with. That is the fundamental tenet of democracy. We shouldn't say to people you can't make that argument. We should defeat that argument through reason and demonstration, and that is absolutely vital and one that we must not and cannot move away from.
The House of Commons will hold what could be its final debate on the government's flagship Rwanda policy later. The Lords inflicted a series of defeats again last night and sent it back to the Commons to be revised, despite MPs overturning previous changes. It comes as reports in The Times suggest the Prime Minister could use RAF planes to take migrants to Rwanda after the Home Office failed to find an airline that would charter the flights. Experts are warning relentless pressure on the health service is taking an enormous toll, with more than 3/4 of NHS staff facing mental health challenges in the last year. New figures from the YouGov also reveal more than half of healthcare staff have struggled with stress and low mood, and 40% experienced exhaustion. The organisation NHS Charities Together is now calling on the public to make sure healthcare workers are looked after. Shadow Education Minister Catherine McKinnell told GB News that ensuring a resilient NHS will be a top priority for a Labour government.
We know that there are almost 500,000 children waiting to see someone about their mental health. It's just appalling. It's a scandal, and it's brewing up problems for the long term as well. So Labour would prioritise this, and we would pay for it by removing the tax exemptions that private schools currently enjoy. We appreciate everybody's, facing challenges in terms of the economy and the mismanagement by the government, but ultimately our priority would be putting that money, which we would raise, 1.3 to 1.5 billion. That's been independently verified.
The Foreign Secretary says more can and should be done to sanction Iran following its attack on Israel. Lord Cameron's in Israel for talks with Benjamin Netanyahu as the Israeli Prime Minister considers his response to Iran's missile and drone attack on his country. Lord Cameron's expected to echo the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's calls for calm heads. Mr. Sunak told his Israeli counterpart that significant escalation is in no one's interest and would only deepen insecurity in the Middle East. In the US, the first 7 jurors for Donald Trump's hush money trial have been chosen. During selection, the jurors were quizzed about social media posts, political views, and whether they can judge the former president fairly. The judge overseeing the New York trial says opening statements could come on Monday. However, Trump's spoken out against the judge, repeatedly calling him conflicted.
It's a rigged trial. Our courts, everything is screwed up in New York, and the whole world is watching. This judge is so conflicted. You understand that. You'll take a look at that. There's never been a judge so conflicted as this. It's ridiculous.
And Lloyds Bank says more than £1 million could have been lost to fraudsters selling fake tickets to see Taylor Swift. The bank's warning music fans after more than 600 customers came forward to report being scammed. It estimates 3,000 people could have fallen victim. The average amount lost by each victim is £332, though in some cases it was over £1,000. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's over to Andrew and Bev.
10:07, you're with Britain's News on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. A lot of you getting in touch.
Right, you've all been getting in touch. You're very incensed about this slapping ban. I'm not surprised. This debate as to whether we should be banning smacking for children from parents. Chris has said it was fine for me getting a slap. It reinforced the fact that I'd done something wrong. It made me think before doing something again and taught me respect for adults, which doesn't exist in today's society. A lot of you feeling so strongly about this. Barry, who is a GB News member, good morning, Barry. Brutalising violence, what ridiculous words to use for normal disciplining of children. Right. Of course, no decent parent would really hurt their child, but a deserved slap is necessary for many children. It's better than growing up spoiled, entitled brats, as far too many do. Gary, the reason the youth of today are the way they are is because of this no smacking nonsense. These non-smacking groups should go out into the inner cities and see the real world. When is it OK for pupils to assault teachers on a regular basis? That's not reported.
Yeah.
And
so many teachers are leaving the profession because they are being assaulted in the classroom.
Yeah.
By loutish boys.
We've never had
and girls.
We've never had less physical discipline of children from parents, and we've never had more physically violent children.
That's right.
So
where's the joined up
join the
thinking?
dots. And also, if you think about what happened last night with the smoking vote in the Commons, if Rishi Sunak and this Conservative government bow down to this pressure from these paediatricians, it yet again plays into the idea that the Conservatives are big state, we will interfere in your family life, we will tell you what you can and can't do.
Because it's gone through in Wales and Scotland, where they've got devolved governments, SNP in Scotland, Labour in Wales,
That's right.
And I hope they tell the paediatricians to clear off.
Yeah, and in fact, somebody messaged from Wales.
Could these doctors just spend more time seeing people, watching this programme and listening to this programme, actually so they can get an appointment rather than delivering long, windy political statements?
The other thing is, of course, if you call all discipline of children with a light smack, if you call that physical violence, you actually neglect to give attention to genuine child abuse, where kids are being beaten up at home.
Yeah.
Because it all just comes into one banner, and it's not the same. Not the same at all. Right, keep your messages coming. gbnews.com/your say.
Now, is free speech under threat? Yes. Police tried, as you know, to shut down the first day of the National Conservatism Conference in Brussels yesterday while Nigel Farage was speaking.
The move was labelled unacceptable by the Belgian Prime Minister, and a UK government source told GB News.
It's unclear exactly what's happened here, but the scenes will worry anyone who believes in free speech. Free society should be competent enough to allow free debate. It's not unclear what happened. The local mayor, a left-winger, banned it, tried to ban it because he said there were issues there that were likely to cause a disturbance of the peace. No, the mayor caused a breach of the peace by trying to ban a genuine political conference.
Well, Labour's been keen to point to the calibre of attendees at the conference, as Shadow Minister for Schools Catherine McKinnell told GB News earlier.
We know that there are almost 500,000 children waiting to see someone about their mental health. It's just appalling. It's a scandal, and it's brewing up problems for the long term as well. So Labour would prioritise this, and we would pay for it by removing the tax exemptions that private schools currently enjoy. We appreciate everybody's, facing challenges in terms of the economy and the mismanagement by the government, but ultimately our priority would be putting that money, which we would raise 1.3 to 1.5 billion. That's been independently verified.
Wrong clip, I'm afraid. That was that was her talking earlier.
Yeah.
Catherine McKinnell. Actually, she did go on to talk about free speech. We'll play you that maybe in a minute. Well, the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, was even seen mocking the scenes in Brussels. He gave this scathing attack on Home Secretary Suella Braverman.
Former Home Secretary.
Former.
Right, Honourable Member for Fareham, who couldn't be here today with us, Mr Deputy Speaker, because she's currently in Brussels, surrounded by the police who are trying to shut down the event she's attended with some far-right fanatics with whom she has much in common.
That was such a cheap points win from Wes Streeting. It's pathetic.
Also to say she's got a lot in common with far-right fanatics. Who's the far-right fanatic? Nigel Farage?
No.
And today, an EU Prime Minister is speaking, Viktor Orban. I don't particularly like him.
That was really disappointing from Wes Streeting.
Well,
really disappointing.
Who's going to be a key figure in the next Labour government. Well, joining us now from Brussels is our reporter, Charlie Peters. Charlie, what's happening?
Well, free speech has prevailed. The event is on. NatCon is going ahead today after a Belgian High Court, the most senior court for public administration, overruled an order from that district mayor in Brussels yesterday, which sought to shut down this event with dozens of police officers gathering and not letting anyone enter the venue. Today, there are still some police here, although those gathered today are to protect the event and the politicians who have arrived. Just in the last hour, we've seen the Prime Minister of Hungary, who you just mentioned, Andrew, Viktor Orban. He's arriving to give a keynote address in the next few moments. And we've also seen the Israeli ambassador to Belgium arrive shortly afterwards. So it's going ahead as planned, but the organisers inside say that what they faced yesterday was a tin pot dictatorship, that they were attempted to be shut down by political opponents who do not want them to gather in Brussels, who they say they fear their politics and that they would rather shut them down through censorious means than engage with them. I've also pointed out the fact that we've only heard a couple of statements in support of the conference. We heard from the Prime Minister's spokesperson saying that it's raised concerns, and we also heard from the Prime Minister of Belgium, as you said, who said that it was completely unacceptable. But that's where it ends. Many people attending here have expressed concern about the lack of wider conversation, with the French presidential candidate Eric Zemmour telling me in the last few moments that he's still waiting for Emmanuel Macron to speak out against this blatant censorship in Brussels. But the event is going ahead today. We're going to try and find some MEPs later and see what they think about this censorship in the centre of Europe.
All right, that's Charlie Peters outside that conference. Joining us now is the Editor-in-Chief of the Brussels Report, Peter Klepp. Peter, can you explain to our viewers and listeners exactly this conference? What is this conference and who are the people who are attending it?
So it's a broad church, really. It's meant to gather those supporting conservative ideas, which range from centre-right to what you could call perhaps right-wing populist sentiment.
So was it a surprise to you, as the editor-in-chief of Brussels Report, that this populist, right-leaning political conference of thought really is what it is, isn't it? They're swapping ideas, they're talking about policy. Was it a surprise to you that it was closed down on day one?
Well, actually, yes and no. Yes, because these things have been happening, especially in Francophone Belgium. Once in a while, mayors, abusing the security argument to ban conference they do not like. But then in the run-up to the conference, it became clear that there was going to be trouble. And actually, this is the third venue that the conference, ultimately had to secure. Initially, there were venues in the district of Brussels City and the district of Etterbeek, were both mayors, one from socialist background, one from a supposedly liberal background, pressured the the private owners of the venue not to hold a conference, and they folded. But thankfully, the owner of this particular venue, a Tunisian man, he stood for free speech.
And it's going ahead today, Peter. My understanding is that a larger court than that in Brussels, which allowed it to shut down, overrode that original decision yesterday. Does that mean that there can be no more possibility of the police arriving there for day two?
Exactly. This is it. So the top administrative court of Belgium has decided that the arguments of the mayor were too weak. Actually, if you look into Belgian law, then abuse of police power is punishable up to 1 year of prison sentence. So I'm not sure if the prosecutor will take action against the mayor. I would wish so, but in theory they are able to do so. Yeah.
Peter, do you suspect the presence, the talismanic figure, if you like, of Nigel Farage being there, the man so associated with Brexit, getting Britain out of the European Union? Because without Nigel Farage, there would never have been a referendum. Do you think that was the trigger point for this hapless mayor in Belgium?
I do think it sort of played a role. I mean, Nigel is sort of a hate figure for some on the European left. But talking about the mayor, actually, it's interesting. He was kicked out of the Belgian Francophone Socialist Party because he has close links with a Turkish fascist movement, the Grey Wolves. So in a way, you could say he's far right himself.
OK, thank you so much. Editor-in-Chief of Brussels Report, Peter Klepp, there this morning.
What an own goal. In the home of the European Union. It's what it was all about.
And you know what?
They can't stand it because it was Nigel.
Thank goodness for people like Nigel Farage. I know he's divisive, I get it. I think a lot more people are waking up to what he actually stands for as opposed to how he's been characterised. But thank goodness for people like that, because they're not just fighting for the free speech of their political persuasion, they are fighting for the free speech of everybody, regardless of their political persuasion. And it seems like the left can't see that in the press this morning.
I wish they'd piled onto that stage, the police, and tried to arrest him at gunpoint.
I mean, I'm not saying Nigel would have enjoyed that, but probably would have enjoyed that.
Mind you, these images have gone all around the world, and it's not a good look for Belgium.
Right, still to come this morning, a report by MPs has said that the BBC's plans to move spending outside of London is being taken forward without a clear plan, and their older audiences are being neglected. Why? Well, they're all turning into GB News, probably. This is Britain's Newsroom. Don't go anywhere.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The perception of a crime being committed is not based on whether that person intended to commit a crime or not, but whether the victim, in inverted commas, or anybody else for that matter who happened to hear whatever was said, determines that it was motivated by malice or ill will. Most of these things come out in heated exchanges or in, very casual exchanges. And then somebody says, oh, I'm offended or I'm hurt or I'm whatever because this was clearly malicious and it's against me as a black person or a transgender or sexuality, whatever it might be, and somebody says, I perceive this to be motivated by hate. Now, at that point, what is the reasonable test that anybody could apply as to what was in somebody's mind at the time? You don't know what I'm thinking now. I don't know what you're thinking now. Why is it that a crime can be committed on the basis of what somebody is alleged to be thinking?
Well, that's also how discrimination often works, because people have worked out these days that saying something or sending an email like one I received some years ago that said, let's go round her place with pickaxe handles and balaclavas and see what we can do. Now, that's an email that was sent about me. People have worked out that you don't do that. But from the circumstance of what happens, if racial taunts were being shouted, if taunts about someone's protected characteristic were being shouted in the run-up to what then happened, it would be pretty obvious that that was a hate crime.
But we know, for example, that street preachers have been arrested merely for quoting the Bible and without actually intending, anything beyond that.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
10:21, you're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Andrew Bismuth, the panel's here, former Labour MP Stephen Pound and the broadcaster Mike Parry. Welcome to you both.
Right, gentlemen, let's talk about this BBC spending plan, which has been criticised by MPs. What are they criticising them for?
Well, do you know, this is almost becoming an irrelevance now. I mean, you know, what the BBC are getting up to, I mean, it's deck chairs on the Titanic time. I mean, this was a few years ago. Hazel Blears is a very good Home Office minister, and she said to the BBC, why don't you come to Salford? We'll lay everything on to you. There'll be
where was her
canals."
constituency? Sorry, where was her constituency?
Well, oddly enough, it was Salford.
Yes, funny
that. Yeah, but you know, you come here, get all the cow heel and tripe you can manage, you know, whatever you want. And so a lot of people said, well, we're not going up to Manchester. And it became very awkward. I mean, when I did, pause for applause here, Celebrity University Challenge, they had to drive us up from London to Manchester and back again. So what the BBC are now saying is, oh, we want to spread it around the country. We want levelling up. And I think it's just fairly silly. Look, broadcasting, by definition, is broadcasting. You can actually spread it around the country. But getting back to the basic point, what the BBC gets up to now, you know, in a few years' time, we'll be saying, the BB what?
I think that move to Manchester was pretty successful, though, definitely for that area, Mike. I'm from that area, and Media City transformed Salford Quays.
I totally agree. You know, it was a big boom there, and they opened up the tram network to get you out to Media City, and nice hotels grew up around there. And I've done shows in Manchester and stayed there, you know, and done it. But you see, the BBC to me are directionless. They don't really have a cogent policy on what to do. And this latest row is all about their drive to pursue younger audiences. Yeah. Now, as Stephen has already pointed out, you shouldn't be pursuing audiences anymore because the audience will go where they want to go. Yeah. You know what I mean? And young people...
Look at Ken Bruce.
Well,
Exactly.
I mean, they're destroying radio too by getting rid of all those older household name presenters. They're putting young people there, and the viewing figures are tanking.
They are.
The listening figures are tanking.
They are. And what they're doing with their budgets is they're now putting out the same output on a range of stations instead of individual output for each station. Local radio, we've had this conversation before, damaging local newspapers by trying to seize the output of information in that area. And that's what this latest one is about. BBC local radio cuts harm older audiences because older people still rely on switching on their radio, you know, at 6 o'clock in the evening, weather forecast and all that kind of stuff, but they're not getting any local information.
Oh, mate, no, sorry, not the shipping forecast.
The shipping forecast, indeed.
We can all recite it, I hope.
That's right. And the broader question here is the BBC fit for purpose in the modern world? And I would say, no, it's not.
Well,
it's got to be looked at.
And certainly shouldn't be underpinned by a public subsidy in the form
absolutely.
of the TV licence.
It's just gone up to 159 quid,
No,
hasn't
it's
it?
going up from 159 to about 172.
Is it really?
Yeah.
That's
And Andrew, I
disgraceful.
don't think we're allowed to actually mention rival platforms, but there's a radio station for the older listener, the more discerning gentleman and lady, or perhaps.
That's Saga Radio.
No,
Is
it's
it
called Boom Radio.
Boom Radio?
Yeah.
For the boomers, for the baby boomers.
It is. C'est moi.
Yeah.
But the point about this is, these are people who used to listen to Jimmy Young and Ken Bruce and people on the BBC.
Yeah.
The BBC has now zoomed off over into the woke highlands, and we've now actually. Instead of sitting and moaning, they've created it. You know, I now have David Hamilton.
Yeah.
Who I brought up.
But the problem is, it's neither. Sadly, it's sort of neither use nor ornament, as my mother would say, because they aren't going to pull in a younger audience because they consume media in a completely different way.
I totally agree.
But your generation just uses smartphones.
And a lot of the older people, I hate to say it, well, I don't hate to say it, I'm delighted to say it, a lot of that older demographic are finding GB News. They absolutely love it.
They definitely are. And when they want to go to music, there's all sorts of greatest hits stations all over the place. That's what I do. If I'm in my car, it's so easy now on a digital hit, greatest hits and all that. But again, when Stephen said about, moving people around the country, broadcasting is a helicopter floating over your life. It doesn't matter where the output is coming from, does it? No. As long as it sounds good. Yeah. And this, to me, just seems to be another woke idea. Move it out of London to anywhere else. So they move to the mailbox in Birmingham, but then they decide to go to Digbeth. People won't like Digbeth, believe me.
I know. I've been
Sorry if you're watching from Digbeth. I'm sure it's lovely.
Yes, well, I worked in Birmingham for a couple of years. I think I agree with Mike, actually. Yeah. But the mailbox in Birmingham, achingly trendy and cool.
Oh, absolutely. And it's on the Broad Street now, isn't it? With all the great hotels and all the golfers stay there and all that kind of stuff.
The best I think the BBC can hope for is to concentrate on still producing some sort of output that the whole family watch. Strictly Come Down. Bake Off in Texas. Goes to Channel 4. Some of that factual entertainment stuff that the BBC make is the only output that a whole family can watch.
And the great dramas that they make as well. They still make great drama. Isn't that Blue Lights? The Northern Ireland one. Is that one of those?
As the BBC are here to defend themselves, we do have to read out their statement. They say, we have a very clear plan on how we will move investment, programming and decision-making across the UK. That was from a BBC director. It wasn't the most imaginative statement in the world.
Decision-making? I mean, if that's not a recipe for chaos, I don't know what is. So you've got regional decision-making.
Right, should we talk about smoking or smacking? There's banning everything, aren't they? Smoking ban, Stephen. Go on, smoking. This vote last night pretty much proved to me that Rishi Sunak does not have the majority of his MPs behind him. He represents completely different values.
Well, it's just a difficult one because nobody really can defend smoking, in all honesty. You cannot defend...
No one can defend it at all.
OK, well, good. Let's start on that basis.
It's bad.
The question is, what do we do about it? Now, interestingly, smoking is tailing off in virtually every demographic group except one.
Yeah.
And there's young people, 16 to 21, and they are smoking more.
I find that hard to believe.
I didn't know that either.
Up by the figures. They're vaping and they're smoking cannabis.
No. I mean, do you remember what Oscar Wilde said about war? He said, as long as it's perceived to be wicked, it will always have its adherents. It's only when it's seen to be vulgar that people will... The same thing applies to smoking. Smoking is still... I'm sorry, it's still Bogart, it's still cool, it's Leonardo DiCaprio, it's all that image. I'm reluctantly saying... And I know in the argument, I was listening to the debate in the House yesterday, people were saying the libertarian argument, people should smoke, they should have the right to kill themselves. Well, in that case, they don't have to wear seatbelts, they shouldn't have to wear crash helmets, and, the legalised heroin argument came. I think it's clumsy, it's lumpy, it's clunky, but in all honesty, we should actually be moving away.
I totally agree. Now, I was an outpatient at Harefield Hospital for 20 years. That's where they transplant hearts and lungs, often at the same time. And I've seen an infected lung taken out of a human being in middle age, in their 40s. It is just a bag of tar. That's all it is. That's all your lung is. Now, I would like to see it banned almost immediately because
Would ban smoking?
I would ban smoking.
Would you, Mike?
I would ban smoking. I'll tell you why. Because people say, oh, you know, the libertarian view is it'll be alcohol next. No, 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 no. Alcohol is part of a social group. We go into pubs to drink beer. We have parties and we serve alcohol. But nobody goes to a smoking party. Nobody gets together to enjoy a fag. It's something you become addicted to because you start at a young age. And the point I'm making is that if it's not available to get addicted to, you won't get addicted to it and it won't kill you.
Except
so I think...
The only thing that's worse than smoking is obesity for the NHS in terms of the cost of the NHS. So if we're going to ban smoking, you better get used to the idea that you're not going to be allowed to have your burger.
No processed food. There was a few years ago, when they still had smoking at football grounds, there was a big survey actually done by a thing called Forest, the Freedom Organisation for smoking. And they actually picked up the dog ends and the fag packets at the football ground. And they found that 70% of the cigarettes smoked in football grounds were illegal. The ones that people have brought in from Holland, particularly.
Really?
Yeah.
And so this is the issue. I mean, there's going to be a concomitant rise in smuggled tobacco. We know about that.
Of course.
And the government had better be prepared for that. Otherwise, they're going to have egg on their face and ash on their tail.
And the other point is that if you have a few drinks, you don't immediately damage your body. But the first 3 or 4 cigarettes you have damage your body. If you have a cake, it doesn't immediately damage your body. But if you have too much cake...
I hate banning things, but actually, surely the government's got to be on the side of a policy designed to try to stop teenagers getting into smoking.
Exactly.
Surely it's got to be.
Exactly.
It's got to be right.
I mean, if it leads to lung cancer, and a mate of mine, actually, in Fleet Street, died at the age of 40 of lung cancer. He smoked 60 cigarettes a day. And, you know, you hear these people say, oh, no, my granddad's been smoking Woodbines and he's 92 and he's still alive. Well, believe me, that's the exception to the rule.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Right, thank you, gentlemen. You will be back in about an hour's time. For now, though, your very latest news headlines with the brilliant Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you. The top stories this hour. The rate of inflation has fallen to its lowest level in 2.5 years, which the Prime Minister says shows the government's plan is working. Figures from the Office for National Statistics shows it eased to 3.2% in March, compared to 3.4% the month before. Economists say a dip in food prices is the main reason for the slowdown. Furniture and household goods prices also contributed to the fall. The Governor of the Bank of England has signalled the UK is still on course for an interest rate cut despite the news. Smacking children should be made illegal in England and Northern Ireland. That's according to children's doctors. The Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health says the current law in England and Northern Ireland has created grey areas, which means there's sometimes a defence to physical punishment. Their report warns children suffer lasting mental and physical effects from being hit in the home. Striking a child is already illegal in Scotland and Wales and in many other countries around the world. Next, some breaking news. A police officer has been stabbed in the shoulder in North London. The Metropolitan Police say the officer has been responding to reports of a man with a knife in Enfield yesterday afternoon. A 30-year-old man has now been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. Lord Cameron says Israel is preparing to retaliate in response to Saturday's missile and drone strike by Iran as he visits the country for talks with its leaders. Lord Cameron's expected to echo the Prime Minister's calls for calm heads, but also told reporters that Tehran needs to be given a clear and unequivocal message by world leaders. It comes after Rishi Sunak told his Israeli counterpart significant escalation is in no one's interest, in a caution over the crisis in the Middle East. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2466 and €1.1719 euros. The price of gold is £1,919 and 29 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,860 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come this morning, we're going to be reflecting on Catherine Birbalsing's victory yesterday in court. She's Britain's most strictest head teacher, according to her Channel 4 series All About Her. The mother of the Muslim pupil who took the case. Have you read the statement from her?
No.
She says that my daughter's impassioned stance compelled me to support her, and I stand firm in that decision. Well, luckily, they got thrown out.
Look, she stood firmly with £150,000 of our money, because that's how much legal aid they got, which is, frankly, outrageous.
Bingo. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. On the M8 in Glasgow, the outside lane's closed eastbound where someone's broken down at junction 22. For the M77, there are queues from junction 23 now at Ibrox. In East Yorkshire, the A63 is blocked westbound by an accident on Hessel Road in Hull, causing queues. On the M53 in Cheshire, there's a lane closed southbound where a car overturned between junctions 10 and 11 towards the M56. There are long delays with queues from junction 5 at Eastham. The M5 in Worcestershire, the northbound entry slip road's closed at junction 8 from the M50 after an accident. In Merthyr Tydfil, the A465 head to the Valleys roads closed eastbound from the Dulles Top roundabout to the Rimley interchange after an accident with long delays there. And in West Sussex, the A23 is closed southbound off junction 11 of the M23 at Pease Pottage for repairs after a car caught fire. Queues back to junction 10A. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In every corner of the world, people celebrate English tradition and values as members of the Royal Society of St George. Yet here in England, branches are closing as membership dwindles.
I feel that in this country, St George is all but dead and buried.
Until recently, Stephen Warden from Wigston was president of the Leicestershire branch. Despite spending £1,500 of his own money advertising, he couldn't find enough members to keep it running.
I did everything humanly possible to get new members into the branch from the local environment, but they were just not interested in joining.
He thinks changing demographics and declining interest in the society's values contributed to disappearing membership. But he also blames political leadership at national and local levels. Stephen claims his proposal for a St George's Day parade was repeatedly rejected by Leicester City Council over 10 years. A celebration is planned for St George's Day, but like most cities and towns, no parade will pass through the streets. A Leicester City Council spokesperson said, Leicester's annual celebrations of St George's Day have been organised and funded by the City Council for many decades, and they remain an important part of the city's festival calendar. Some in Leicester say they would like to see more done to celebrate England's patron saint.
I think it's a sign of patriotism. I think it helps the country. We celebrate a lot of religious festivals here.
People forget, I think, what is important to England.
Maybe it's been sort of jumped onto with the wrong crowd, but I think nowadays it's just completely different.
Back in Wigston, St George's Cross flies above Stephen's home.
It makes me feel good because I know at least I've not forgotten St George if everybody else has.
Now, we breathed a huge sigh of relief yesterday.
We don't always agree, but we were absolutely rooting for Catherine Birbalsingh.
So this is Britain's strictest head teacher, as she was named by that Channel 4 series. It was a fly on the wall at her school, and she won a legal challenge yesterday brought by a pupil who claimed that the prayer restrictions at the Michaela Community School in North London were discriminatory. Well,
in an extensive ruling, the High Court said the prayer ban was lawful and justified as a proportionate means of achieving the legitimate aims of the school.
In response to the ruling, Birbalsingh gave a very long statement, but she said a school should be free to do what is right for the pupils it serves. The court's decision is therefore a victory for all schools.
She goes on to say multiculturalism works at Michaela because we have a clear identity which anyone can sign up to if they're willing to compromise. That's the key. And that pupil knew the rules when she joined that school.
Music to our ears. Well, joining us now is the Executive Head Teacher of St Thomas the Apostle School in London, Serge Safai. Good morning, Serge.
Good morning.
Good morning. What was your reaction to this? We were very nervous it might go the other way and what the implications that might be for head teachers all around the country.
I was too, and I need to just start off with saying well done to the head teacher and the governing body for actually standing up for once, you know, because this took courage. I mean, I'm glad to say that your programme brings up every now and again the story of that teacher who's gone missing for 3 years in hiding because of trying to educate.
Yeah.
You know, no one else likes to talk about it, but maybe with last week's cash report, we're finally having a little bit of a dose of common sense. And then, of course, you get that crazy woman on this morning about smacking. So I sort of, I despair at times, but 45 years as a teacher, I've brought up my own family. But I'm sorry, I'll try not to get off the point here. This is absolutely right. I think, Andrew, you've already mentioned it. For goodness sake, we have school choice in this country. You can apply for whatever school you like. You don't join a school and then try to change the rules. She doesn't like it, take the child out. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to parents about not this sort of thing, but other things. If you don't like what's going on here, take them somewhere else. And the fact that, I mean, you've upset me again, Andrew, £150,000. Who's
Absolutely.
okay?
You think what you could have done with that money
Well,
as a head
and
teacher?
the thing is that I don't know who repays the school, because I know I've been involved in little bits and pieces. The school would have had to pay for their own legal fees. I don't know if the DfE will refund that. That's money straight out to the school budget. That should have gone to the children. Never mind the time. And I've used the word courage here because I also know that this head teacher, and I'm assuming the governing body, would have come under huge pressure to buckle. And I'm really glad they didn't. And for once, common sense has prevailed.
Well, you're right. And in fact, it's very interesting how this story is being handled by different elements of the British media, because the Daily Mail have a front page victory for the bravest head teacher in Britain. Some of the other papers, particularly I noticed The Guardian and also online the BBC, they said this was, they haven't, I'm paraphrasing, but they sold it as a failure of the pupil. So we were celebrating, I think, the victory of Catherine Birbalsingh. How hard would it have been, in your experience as a head teacher, to take this position? She said the back end of last year was incredibly stressful for her.
But I tell you, hats off to her. And she would have had the full backing of her governing body. I think we need to understand, governors, they don't get paid. They do this job for free. They would have been under huge pressure just to buckle. It would have been a lot easier just to find a room and let the kids do what they like. Good for her. I'd like to think that I would have taken a similar stance. I'd like to think that I would have got my backing from my governing body. But quite frankly, all over the country, more often than not, I imagine governors and head teachers will buckle and just give up the right to do what they know is correct for their school and their kids.
And this is an important victory, isn't it, in the sense, Serge, this is the head teacher being allowed to run the school the way she wants to do it. That's the call. It's effective saying it's her and it's her call and it's the right call.
Yeah, well, after 45 years in teaching, 20 years as head several schools at different points, you know the best part of the job, you've got a school gate. You can keep the madness away from the kids because they need protecting. And I feel that I fought for 45 years to try and make sure you bring up children properly. I'm fed up with adults abdicating their responsibility in bringing up children. We see it everywhere. But you've got your school gates. And now even that doesn't seem to be strong enough. So well done.
I can't imagine how, you'll know better than us, how awkward that relationship is going to be now, because not only is this child apparently staying at the school, they've got a sibling who wants to join in September. What kind of division, atmosphere, conflict could this still create in the building, even though this has been settled legally?
Yeah, well, that's the problem. You build a school community on trust. Yeah. You bring up kids together with the parent. So talk about betrayal of trust. You know, this mother, I understand she's given a statement, so I didn't quite hear it. You know, but get your kid out. You don't like it, take your kid elsewhere, and the quicker the better. And I'm sure she's been told that. And but I'm still blown away by the fact that someone's decided that this person needs legal aid. We've got rules and regulations in our country. You don't have to send a kid to school. You can even educate from home if you want to. You're free to do that in this country. Don't take a school to court. Cost an awful lot of money. Never mind all the add-ons that we don't really know the details of, but I know went on, you know, in terms to apply pressure. We've had the right result here, but you're right, Bev. This problem for that school, I imagine, won't go away.
All right. Sadly, you do have to go away now, but happy to come back any time and see us. That was Executive Head Teacher at St Thomas the Apostle School in London. Can I send my kids to his school?
Yeah, he sounds a great head teacher, doesn't he?
Sapphire. But you know that exasperation you can hear in his voice?
Yeah.
We all feel that. I just want to defend Anna May Mangan. She was a broadcaster who said earlier that she strongly disagreed about smacking children, and she would no doubt strongly disagree that Serge's assessment that he made of her there.
I think it was her use of the word violence, which I challenged her on that anyway.
Right, we are going to take a quick break, but after the break, breaking news that a police officer has been stabbed in London. We're going to bring you the very latest. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Many of us will have a fine, bright day today with some sunshine. Still going to be pretty gusty across the east with a fair few showers, and it is going to turn damp in Northern Ireland. A dry start, but the cloud and rain is steadily pushing in from the north. We'll have showers across northeast Scotland through the day, and some will graze these eastern counties of England, where there's a pretty chilly and brisk wind blowing along those North Sea coasts. One or two scattered showers elsewhere, and a bit more cloud coming into West Wales later. But as I said, for many, dry and bright. It isn't warm, though. It's chilly out there this morning, and temperatures struggling, maybe in the teens in London, but 6 or 7 degrees for most of the day in Northern Ireland. That's going to feel pretty chilly. Some of that rain from Northern Ireland will get into parts of South Wales and South West England this evening, so it's turning a little damp here. Still a few showers through the night across East Anglia and parts of Kent and the far north of Scotland. But for most, it's a dry night, a clear night. Pretty chilly one again, temperatures well down into single figures. Pockets of frost likely for Wales, the Midlands and northern England, certainly in rural areas. We will see quite a bit of sunshine on Thursday morning across the southern half of the UK, but clouding over through the night and for the morning across Scotland and Northern Ireland, and further outbreaks of rain pushing in here. Quite a wet day actually for western Scotland. Increasingly blustery here as well. But further south, the winds will be light. Yes, it'll cloud over a little bit, but with some sunshine, we should again get up to 13 degrees.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
News from earlier this morning. A 30-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after a police officer was stabbed in a residential street in North London. The Met Police say he's in a stable condition.
OK, so let's bring in our Home and Security editor, Mark White, for the latest. Mark, what else do we know about this breaking news?
From the Metropolitan Police's second, actually, that a taser was not used in this incident. So these police officers managed to disarm a man with a knife who just stabbed one of their colleagues without the use of a taser. And of course, tasers are very controversial in terms of the fact that there are people who are very anti-taser, but the Metropolitan Police Federation, other federations have said that all officers should be routinely armed with this weapon. Now, this incident unfolded in a street, Mandeville Road in Enfield in North London. This officer was responding to reports of a man armed with a knife in the street. When they attempted to deal with this man and apprehend him, the officer was stabbed. He suffered serious injury to the shoulder. He was bleeding heavily. Colleagues had to use a tourniquet to stop the bleeding as they awaited paramedics to arrive on the scene. Other colleagues of this officer then dealt with that man with the knife, had to disarm him, and in that process this suspect was also injured, not seriously though. He's since been discharged from hospital and is now in police custody on suspicion of attempted murder of this police officer. Now, Assistant Commissioner Matt Dukes has been visiting this officer in hospital this morning. He said in response in a statement, this officer has shown immense bravery apprehending a suspect armed with a knife. Visiting him in hospital, he says, after he was injured, I was struck by his courage and humility. He didn't want to talk about his actions, but to praise the professionalism of the police medic and other colleagues who provided him with vital first aid and arrested the suspect. So a serious incident that unfolded. Luckily, this officer now in a stable condition in hospital, one man in custody, charged with or at least arrested on suspicion of attempted murder.
OK, thank you, Mark. Now, moving on. Inflation has fallen to 3.2%. Finally, some good news. Here to break it down, it's our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money.
The plan is working. Inflation's falling faster than expected to the lowest level in nearly 2.5 years, helping people's money go further. That's the message today from Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Chancellor Jeremy Hunt. But the reality is that inflation remains stubbornly high in the UK. Let's have a look at the situation before the Office for National Statistics published their new inflation data at 7 o'clock this morning. Inflation was down at 3.4% during the year to February 2024, having come all the way down from 11% back in October 2022. And then we got the inflation number for today. Consumer Price Index rose 3.2% during the year to March. So between March 2024 and March 2023, prices rose on average by 3.2%. That's the lowest CPI inflation number since September 2021. It's down, as I said, from over 11% in October 2022, but it's still higher than financial markets expected. Let's have a look at some of the breakdown. Food price inflation is now easing. Back in March, food prices on average were almost 20% higher than they were in March the year before. Food price inflation in January and February fell from 7 to 5%, and we just learned that food inflation during the year to March was 4%, which is good news for shoppers filling their baskets and their trolleys. How about petrol and diesel prices? Well, the fall in petrol and diesel prices is now slowing down. Motor fuels fell 6.5% during the year to February, but they were down, we learnt today, only 3.7% during the year to March. So the fall is slowing, and petrol and diesel prices have actually risen slightly over the last month. Utility bills. Gas and electricity also stubbornly high. Utility bills fell only 1.6% during the year to March, and they've actually risen over the last month as oil and gas prices have risen on world markets. We should say, though, that next month's inflation number, the April number, should see a fall in inflation because of a drop in the Ofgem energy price cap. How about the big question? What does all this mean for interest rates? Well, interest rates are currently at 5.25%. The Bank of England has kept them there since last August. That's the highest in 16 years. And the Bank of England next meets on Thursday, the 9th of May, to decide interest rates. They will be considering the fact that inflation in the US is still high. It just rose to 3.5%, higher than 3.2% here and higher than inflation in the Eurozone, which is 2.4%. The fact that US inflation is actually rising means the Federal Reserve, the US central bank, is less likely to lower interest rates anytime soon, which makes life more complicated for the Bank of England's rate setters if they want to cut rates. And this is the problem, the oil price, the price of energy that the world uses. In mid-January, it was just $73 a barrel. Now it's $91 a barrel, and that's 25% up over the last 3 months. That feeds into petrol, diesel prices, the prices of everything, and there's lots more geopolitical risk, of course, too. And this is why inflation remains stubbornly high. This welcome news comes on top of our cuts to national insurance, say the Tory High Command. So people should start to feel the difference as well as they see it in their paychecks. But the reality is that interest rates, we thought they were going to fall in May or June. After this inflation number, which is still higher than expected, we're more likely to look at July or August for that first interest rate cut.
Fascinating.
Thank you very much. Liam, you have been keeping us busy this morning with the inbox about the smacking ban. Lots of you are incensed about this and saying, you know what? Andy said banning smacking or parental chastisement in the home won't stop the violent abuse of children. If a child is being violently abused, there are already laws to stop that. Such a good point, Andy. It will never stop those people who genuinely abuse their children.
And Neil makes the point you made. Neil says not being able to smack our children is where all these unruly teenagers have come from. Quite right. I was smacked a lot. Shows.
Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Alex has your weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Many of us will have a fine, bright day today with some sunshine. Still going to be pretty gusty across the east with a fair few showers, and it is going to turn damp in Northern Ireland. A dry start, but the cloud and rain is steadily pushing in from the north. We'll have showers across northeast Scotland through the day, and some will graze these eastern counties of England, where there's a pretty chilly and brisk wind blowing along those North Sea coasts. One or two scattered showers elsewhere and a bit more cloud coming into West Wales later. But as I said, for many, dry and bright. It isn't warm, though. It's chilly out there this morning and temperatures struggling, maybe in the teens in London, but 6 or 7 degrees for most of the day in Northern Ireland. That's going to feel pretty chilly. Some of that rain from Northern Ireland will get into parts of South Wales and South West England this evening, so it's turning a little damp here. Still a few showers through the night across East Anglia and parts of Kent and the far north of Scotland. But for most, it's a dry night, a clear night. Pretty chilly one again, temperatures well down into single figures. Pockets of frost likely for Wales, the Midlands and northern England, certainly in rural areas. We will see quite a bit of sunshine on Thursday morning across the southern half of the UK, but clouding over through the night and for the morning across Scotland and Northern Ireland, and further outbreaks of rain pushing in here. Quite a wet day actually for western Scotland. Increasingly blustery here as well, but further south the winds will be light. Yes, it'll cloud over a little bit, but with some sunshine we should again get up to 13 degrees.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest prize so far. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
.11 a.m. on Wednesday, the 17th of April. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Very good morning. Thank you for joining us. So, smoke-free nation or just the nanny state? Rishi Sunak's flagship smoking ban bill passes its first vote, but the policy has split the party.
Good news here, victory for all schools. That's how Britain's strictest head teacher, Catherine Birbalsingh, describes the High Court ruling that her prayer ban at her North London school is in fact lawful.
And how much in peril is free speech? Nigel Farage has hit out at cancel culture in Brussels after the police there attempted to shut down the National Conservatism Conference, where day 2 is now, thankfully, underway.
Keynote speaker, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has just left the venue after delivering his speech, but attendees are asking, where are the EU critics against yesterday's censorship?
Indeed. And time to ban smacking? Not sure. Paediatricians want to outlaw smacking children in England and Northern Ireland to bring them into line with Scotland and Wales. You have been incredibly opinionated on this subject. We're going to get to your messages very shortly.
And we have arguably the best author of my generation, in my opinion. She's won multiple awards. She wrote We Need to Talk About Kevin, and she's got a new book out which taps into a lot of the issues about cancel culture that we talk about on this show. Lionel Shriver will be here in the studio with us. Get in touch this morning, gbnews.com/your say. First, though, here's the very latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you very much. The top stories. First, so some breaking news. Post Office Chief Executive Nick Reed has been exonerated of all misconduct allegations following an independent investigation. It follows claims of misconduct against the CEO, and in a statement, the Post Office's board said Mr Reed has their full and united backing to continue to lead the business, and said allegations will always be thoroughly and consistently investigated, whoever they are aimed at. It comes as an inquiry is continuing into the Post Office scandal, which saw sub-postmasters wrongly convicted over cash that had apparently gone missing when an IT programme was actually to blame. In other news, the Prime Minister hailed today's inflation figures, saying they demonstrate his economic plan is working. Figures show the rate of inflation's fallen to its lowest level in 2.5 years, down to 3.2% in March. That's compared to 3.4% the month before. Economists say a dip in food prices is the main reason. Rishi Sunak says it's part of a brighter economic picture.
We've also seen mortgage rates fall, energy bills fall, and data this week showed that wages have been rising faster than inflation for 9 months in a row. Now, because of all of that, we've been able to cut people's taxes, a £900 tax cut for the average worker, and increase the state pension by £900 this month. That all shows that our plan is working, and my simple message would be, if we stick to that plan, people can have confidence that there's a brighter future ahead.
Smacking children should be made illegal in England and Northern Ireland, according to children's doctors. The Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health says the current law has created grey areas, which mean there's sometimes a defence to physical punishment. Their report warns children suffer lasting mental and physical effects from being hit in the home. Striking a child is already illegal in Scotland and Wales and in many other countries around the world. The National Conservatism Conference is again underway after it was disrupted yesterday. Well, yesterday police arrived at the conference while Nigel Farage was addressing the event. They gave everyone 15 minutes to leave the venue. Belgium's Prime Minister described the actions as unacceptable and unconstitutional. Here, Downing Street said the attempt by police in Brussels to shut down the conference was extremely disturbing. Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Laura Trott, told GB News that democracy must be defended.
You absolutely need to defend that. You have to be able to be on a platform generally with people that you disagree with. That is the fundamental tenet of democracy. We shouldn't say to people you can't make that argument. We should defeat that argument through reason and demonstration, and that is absolutely vital and one that we must not and cannot move away from.
Torrential rain and flooding is continuing to cause severe disruption across Dubai. Video shows cars swamped in water, with waves buffeting traffic as roads were brought to a standstill. Dubai International Airport is also experiencing significant disruption, with another wave of unstable weather expected. The House of Commons will hold what could be its final debate on the government's flagship Rwanda policy later. The Lords inflicted a series of defeats again last night and sent it back to the Commons to be revised despite MPs overturning previous changes. It comes as reports in The Times suggest the Prime Minister could use RAF planes to take migrants to Rwanda after the Home Office failed to find an airline that would charter the flights. Experts are warning relentless pressure on the health service is taking an enormous toll, with more than 3/4 of NHS staff facing mental health challenges in the last year. New figures from YouGov also reveal more than half of healthcare staff have struggled with stress and low mood, and 40% experienced exhaustion. The organisation NHS Charities Together is now calling on the public to make sure healthcare workers are looked after. Shadow Education Minister Catherine McKinnell told GB News ensuring a resilient NHS will be a top priority for a Labour government.
We know that there are almost 500,000 children waiting to see someone about their mental health. It's just appalling. It's a scandal, and it's brewing up problems for the long term as well. So Labour would prioritise this, and we would pay for it by removing the tax exemptions that private schools currently enjoy. We appreciate everybody's facing challenges in terms of the economy and the mismanagement by the government, but ultimately our priority would be putting that money, which we would raise 1.3 to 1.5 billion. That's been independently verified.
And the Foreign Secretary says more can and should be done to sanction Iran following its attack on Israel. Lord Cameron's in Israel for talks with Benjamin Netanyahu as the Israeli Prime Minister considers his response to Iran's missile and drone attack on his country. He's expected to echo the Prime Minister's calls for calm heads. Rishi Sunak told his Israeli counterpart significant escalation is in no one's interest and would only deepen insecurity in the Middle East. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
It's 11:07 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. Thank you for joining us. Do you want to have a look at what you've been saying at home? Shall we have a little look? All your comments. You've been incensed by this idea that a group of paediatricians have got together to say that we should ban smacking, parents smacking their children.
Why don't they just let parents get on with it?
Well, I guess why? Because you're right. I mean, clearly child abuse in the home is a problem. It really is. And do you know what? It's terrible in lockdown. Nobody seems to care there.
So the government changes the law. They think that's going to stop it?
It won't stop it. All it will do is stop those well-meaning, well-intentioned parents who want to keep their kids within some sort of firm boundary lines from being able to do so.
What would the paediatricians think about the fact the slipper was wielded with great precision by my parents?
Graham says, thank you, Graham. I was smacked when I was naughty. naughty when I was little, as was my son. It's done neither of us any harm.
No.
With my boy, we tried the naughty step, but that had no effect. And in my view, it's actually a form of psychological torture that young brains have difficulty with. I agree. I think it explains a lot of today's problems, to be truthful. I think you're right, Graham, on that. A quick smack dealt with any issue immediately, and it was over and done with. There'd be a few tears, a bit of a sting for a few minutes. After a time, to think about his actions, there'd be a hug. I'm sorry, all forgotten. I was never hated or was scared of my parents, and I know my son loves me and certainly isn't scared of me in any way. That is so right, in my opinion, and it's so old-fashioned in terms of
It is. And Susan says children had more respect years ago when they knew that there were consequences for bad behaviour. I think that's right.
And I like the idea that a quick, sharp smacker, I think under 7 and under, what's that phrase about show me a man till he's 7,
Yeah.
show me a child till he's 7 and I will show you the man. You've got to lay down those boundaries very young, haven't you? You can't really be smacking your 13-year-old. But I think when you're young, then I think it does work. And you are all completely outraged at home. Helen?
I found one here, actually, who does support the idea of the ban. It says, if parents smack their kids, this is Gemma, don't be surprised if they hit others at school and this misbehave with their teachers, not allowed to smack them. Well, I was smacked and I did not smack other kids at school.
Helen said, I found GB News when it first started. I haven't watched the BBC since. And
Good.
yes, I'm old, she says. Aren't we all, Helen? We all feel quite old at the moment, I think. Rishi Sunak says Oxy used to work for an investment bank and a hedge fund. He does not understand politics. He does not really understand conservative values. We're talking about this in relation to the smoking ban. In fact, we're going on to that now.
Yeah, because it is the flagship legislation of this Parliament, the last Parliament before the election, and Rishi Sunak announced it in his party conference speech. I was listening to it and thought, where did that come from?
Yeah, I know.
I did think that at the time. However, I wasn't alone in thinking that, because 165 Tory MPs, there's about 350 of them, either abstained or voted against. It was a free vote.
So, did the Prime Minister get his plans through? The Prime Minister did get his plans through with the support of Labour MPs. I mean, what does that tell you? Across the House, 383 voted for the ban and 67 were against it.
So this will make it illegal to sell cigarettes to anyone born in 2009 or later. So you have to ask the question, 10 years' time, how are they going to know whether you were born to... I mean, it's going to be almost unenforceable, but isn't it the right direction of travel? I think, on balance, I support the Prime Minister on this one. Let's talk to Deborah Arnott, who's Chief Executive of Action on Smoking. Well, you must be smiling broadly here, Deborah, because we now, if this goes through all its parliamentary stages, including the House of Lords, we will have the toughest anti-smoking laws in the world.
We will, but we won't be the last. We will be first, but we won't be last. I mean, you know, the ban on smoking in public places at the time was seen as just as revolutionary and just as impossible. And no one would like to go back to the days when you could smoke in cinemas, on planes, on trains, everywhere, you know, pubs, clubs, discos. So, you know, the same will be true of this.
What does this
Smoking
mean?
is not a free choice, it's an addiction. You know, the only choice is whether to have that first cigarette. The CMO is very clear about that, and he's absolutely right.
Deborah, do you have any idea what this will mean in terms of tax revenue for the government? Because it will be a huge loss in the next few decades, wouldn't it?
Well, I think it generates about £11 billion smoking revenue.
Well, less than only about 8 billion excise tax and VAT. Well, if people aren't buying cigarettes, they'll be buying something else. So that doesn't really rate. But it's gone down over time and it will continue to go down. And it was always expected that you'd stop having excise tax revenues. The point is that it costs public finances far more in terms of social security payments to smokers who are unwell, lost tax revenue because they can't work, all of these other things, far more than double the amount of excise tax revenue.
And NHS, of course, spending a fortune on cigarette-related illnesses.
Yeah. Well, they are, but actually that's a small part of the total. And you know, the tobacco industry and the front organisations like the Institute of Economic Affairs and Forest try and say, just talk about NHS costs and tax revenue. But as I say, the other things like social security costs, the cost of social care, because smokers need social care on average 10 years earlier, the lost tax revenues from people who are unable to work or can't work full time. You know, all of these things are much more important than the excise revenues.
Talk us about vaping, Deborah, because we know if the vaping industry was here, they would say it is encouraging more, particularly adults, to come off of cigarettes and to go on to vaping, which is not as bad for them. But the worry I would have here is how many young people are getting into vaping, because the vaping industry has cynically made the vapes very attractive in the terms of the colours, the flavours, the names. This bill last night was also trying to get to grips with vaping too.
Yes, look, Ash started surveys on youth vaping in 2013 because once vaping took off amongst adults, there was always a risk that children might take it up. And we were the first ones to say, look, you've got to do something about this. And the government wouldn't listen at the time because they were anti-regulation. And it was only once it really began to take off in the last few years that they realised something needed to be done. So yes, this bill finally does the things we've been calling for some time about, getting rid of the cartoon characters, the sweet names, the products that look like toys that are brightly coloured. Vaping is for adults to quit smoking. It's completely inappropriate for it to be promoted to children, and that's what the CMO says, and that's what we agree with. So we need the legislation both for the smoking ban, but also for the vaping regulations.
OK, thank you very much for joining us. Deborah Arnott there, the Chief Executive of Action on Smoking. And joining us now...
Yeah, I'd just say Deborah's right about, when they brought in the ban on smoking in public places, there was a huge opposition, and some Labour cabinet ministers of free vote voted against it, including Tessa Jow, who was a former health minister, John Reid, a former health secretary. So these things are not always as straightforward.
How times have changed, though, eh? Well, joining us now is the Conservative MP for Buckingham, Greg Smith. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning.
Good morning. So you voted against this last night. Why was that?
Yeah, I did vote against it. I didn't get into politics to ban things and to take away the choices and the individual responsibility of, in this case, future adults from doing what they want to do. I prefaced my comments by saying I've never smoked. I think taking up smoking is probably one of the most nuts things anyone can possibly do. But it's for adults to make up their own mind on what they wish to do. What's coming next is a big worry of mine, because equally the same lobby that's against smoking is against drinking. I do enjoy a couple of pints. They're against eating sugary foods or red meat. Where do we draw the line on this culture of the state telling adults what they can and can't eat, drink, or in this case, smoke? And the other big concern I have is that we're not actually focusing on the things that are actually a challenge right now. When I talk to teachers and head teachers in my constituency, it's children taking up vaping, and it's already illegal for children to buy these devices, these vapes. So if we can't enforce the age restrictions we've got now, just layering in more age restrictions, to me, just isn't the answer. We need much more targeted measures that can particularly get the illicit supply of vapes and indeed tobacco out of circulation, because those knockoff vapes that cost a couple of quid, that are full of unregulated nasties, are doing far more damage, and that's where the attention needs to be, not on banning 26 and 27-year-olds in a few years' time from making the choice as to whether to have a cigarette or not.
I hear that, Greg, and I understand that, but they're talking about stopping 15-year-olds. It's starting at 50. They don't want. This is about stopping people of 15 now buying cigarettes later. So if this kicks in, the law when they're 16, it's not a bad policy, is it, to just make it illegal for a 16-year-old to buy a packet of fags?
Well, it already is, Andrew. That's one of the points I'm making.
18, of course.
It's actually 18. But children are still getting their hands on cigarettes. They're still getting their hands on vapes. I see what you mean, yeah. And if we can't enforce the age restrictions we've got now, and actually some really good points were made in the chamber yesterday around, this is going to fall on the shoulders of shopkeepers who are already under intolerable pressure in some places. There are already serious violence and abuse that shopkeepers have to put up with when they challenge someone on whether they're 18 or not to buy cigarettes or a can of beer or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
now. This legislation isn't actually answering the problems we've got today. It's just kicking it down the road a little bit.
Yeah, Greg, there's a few people getting in touch with us this morning in our inbox saying that during COVID, the government felt they had a right to extend their reach into our lives, and therefore this is a consequence of that. As has there been a significant paradigm shift, and is it going to get worse under Labour?
I mean, I think it'll certainly get worse under Labour, although some of the mood music coming out of Labour, you could see them being tougher on cigarettes, but actually legalising cannabis. So it's a pretty warped and unusual scenario that a future Labour government could potentially pose to the country. But I think you're right. The pandemic did change a lot of attitudes, and the way that everybody's freedom was shut down overnight in a day, with virtually no scrutiny. I think it was necessary at the start of that once in a century, once in 100-year eventuality, but the reach kept creeping, and the medical advice from the chief medical officer and so on was always go harder and deeper on the restrictions of liberty that I think, as now we're seeing with the COVID inquiries, we're seeing with some of the unintended consequences of that lockdown, the effects on children's mental health, the effects on the backlogs in the NHS on getting operations. It's never as straightforward or as easy as you expect when you take any action, no matter how well intentioned.
I think that's the thought police coming to arrest you. We'll let you go. Conservative MP for Buckingham, Greg Smith there. That's the freedom bobbies are there.
He made his point very well, didn't he? But I still think what I should have said was that to make it more difficult for an 18-year-old to buy fags. I know they're an adult, but you don't want 18-year-olds buying fags.
No, you don't. Not under any circumstances. Unfortunately, they do, don't they? It is complicated, isn't it? Would you support a nationwide rollout ban on smacking this time, not smoking?
Yeah.
It's already illegal in Scotland and Wales. Is it time for England and Northern Ireland to follow their lead? No. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
The Princess of Wales is now officially the most popular royal. This is a YouGov poll that found that over 75% of people have a positive view of Princess Catherine, with Prince William only slightly behind his wife at 73%. Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent, is here with this one. But what would you read into that, and as to why?
Well, I think it's hardly surprising. Since the start of the year, the Princess of Wales's popularity is up 6 points with the British public, according to this YouGov poll. And obviously, at the start of the year, she went into hospital for abdominal surgery and has subsequently been diagnosed with cancer and is undergoing surgery. Look, the Princess of Wales, since becoming a member of the royal family, has committed no major faux pas. There's been no particular scandal with her. She always puts family first. And I hate the phrase born a commoner, but she wasn't born into aristocracy. She was not born into the royal family. She gave up her old life. And yes, that comes with lots of privilege, being a member of the royal family, but it also comes with enormous challenges, such as everybody prying into your private life, particularly when it comes to your health. And I think the British public are very much on side with that.
Whereas Prince Harry and Meghan continue to be unpopular. 76 compared to 31% having a positive opinion of Prince Harry, and only 26%, 50 points less than Princess Catherine, is Meghan.
Yes, still not looking great for Harry and Meghan. Prince Andrew is far below them as well.
Doing well on negative views, meaning fewer people have negative views about her than anyone else, is the Princess Royal, Princess Anne.
Indeed, yes. The most hard-working royal, if you go by the number of engagements she carries out each year. No nonsense, no fuss. She never gets herself into any kind of arguments or scandals.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
11:23, you with Britain's Newsroom and GB News with Andrew Piers-Turner. We've got the panel back, Stephen Pound and Mike Parry in the studio. Somebody's got a special birthday.
Yes, it's Posh Spice, OK? Victoria Beckham, 50 years of age today. I put out a tribute to her this morning because...
She'll be thrilled.
Yeah, well, I hope she will be, because I don't like people when they have a go at Victoria Beckham. She was a member of the world's most successful ever girl band.
Yeah.
She's risen from that to become an iconic figure in the world of fashion. Shops on Bond Street, I think. Victoria Beckham.
Bust, hasn't it?
Sorry?
I think it's just gone bankrupt.
Well, whatever. they don't make a lot of money, these fashion houses, but they have influence around the world, and she's got tremendous influence. And she is married. She managed to marry the most famous man in the world, which David Beckham was for about 5 years.
Didn't stop him getting all those awful tattoos, though, did she?
Well, she didn't.
But they're still together, despite the
absolutely,
glitch.
Absolutely. And she's mother to 4 children who don't seem to have too many problems, and who themselves have moved on to some glorious futures, marrying billionaire heiresses and that sort of thing.
I hate the word influencer, but she's a... Oh, yeah.
They're only there for 5 minutes.
I was going to say, I'd say the Shangri-Las.
No, I'm going to check. I'm going to check how many records they sold.
Yeah, they sold... And they were there for 3 or 4 years, and they had about 7 #1 hits, so I think you've got to give her a credit, you know?
Yeah.
Well, that was a long time ago.
They've sold 100 million records worldwide, making the best-selling girl group of all time.
Thank you. I said the biggest girl band in history.
And the most successful British pop act since the Beatles.
How about that?
There we are.
How about that?
So that's quite
happy
something.
birthday, Victoria Beckham.
Tell you what I want,
you know
what I really want.
But there's a cloud on the horizon for them, Mike, isn't there?
Well, Tom Bauer, who is probably the greatest narrator of biographies, isn't he? Certainly in my lifetime. He's bringing a book out, so nobody knows what's going to be in the book. Yeah, it's a book on the Beckhams, but, you know, if Tom Bauer was writing a book about me, I'd find out things about myself even I didn't know.
But
so
Mohammed El Fayed wanted to put a contract out on him.
Yeah. I mean, he's done some extraordinary books, and he gets to the if there's anything embarrassing,
yes, it'll be in the book,
and it'll be in the book.
Right,
Lord Ashcroft hasn't done badly lately.
Can we talk about this? We've been discussing it all day, and our inbox is full of this. This is about a group of paediatricians, Stephen, saying that we shouldn't be able to smack our own children because it leads to violence and mental health problems in later life. Are they right?
I think you've got to work out what the hell do you mean by smacking. I mean, a slap on the back of the legs if the child's completely out of control, I can understand. Taking the belt to a child, no, absolutely not. Hitting with an implement, absolutely not. But in all honesty...
Or even a slipper?
No, I'm sorry. You know, but
well, you could hit them gently with a slipper.
I was slippered.
Sometimes it's just grabbing the slipper that makes the child behave.
If you're hitting them gently with a slipper, there's no flipping point in doing it.
Did you hit your children?
No, I didn't, as a matter of fact. They hit me on a number of occasions.
Did your wife give them the odd little smack?
Occasionally. I mean, she'll hate me for saying this, but you know, she's a magistrate, so I keep quiet about this. But when sometimes
it's
the kids
okay. It's
hysterical,
legal, and it was legal then, and that's the thing, isn't it? We all get quite nervous about admitting
the Isle of
it.
Man until quite recently, and as Mike Parry told me, apparently they had the cat o' nine tails.
In the Isle of Man last century, they certainly did. My parents never smacked me as such. My mum, in frustration, would sometimes smack me on the shoulder, you see what I mean? But I was never smacked around the head and my ears didn't ring. But my stance on this is, as on a lot of other things, parental responsibility overtakes the rule of law that the state wants to impose upon families and how they conduct themselves.
Trust parents.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, no parent who's a decent parent will ever harm its child. I agree with Stephen. I mean, you must have read Sons and Lovers, D.H. Lawrence, where he used to, you know, take his belt off, as you quite rightly say, and bash his children, all that. That, obviously, people should go to jail for that. But if a parent thinks this child will only react to a quick cuff across the head or a slap on the back of the legs, then, you know, I would say leave it to the parent.
Can we talk about victory yesterday for bravest head teacher
love her.
in Britain?
Yep.
Well,
Stephen.
I mean, I think this story's been pretty much widely circulated. We all know what it's all about with Catherine Birbal singing.
Interestingly, not that much in the left-wing press. It really hasn't.
Well, I'm sorry. I tell you what really, really sticks in my throat about this is 150...
I agree,
Wait, I haven't finished yet. 150,000 of our taxpayers'
I agree.
pounds.
It's shocking.
Just to be clear, to defend or to prosecute on behalf of the child, not Catherine Birbal Singh. We don't know how she managed to fund her legal pay.
Yeah, well, the extraordinary thing is that the child, her younger sibling, has applied to come to this school in September.
That causes even more trouble.
Have you seen their figures for actual admission to the Russell Group universities?
They're extraordinary.
It's stunning.
Yeah,
Something like 82% of them getting A stars.
The actual child involved poured huge praise on the school, while at the same time trying to challenge the way it's run. And is it fair that this child is anonymous? Because surely we should have some opportunity to cross-examine the child or question the child to say, why did you bring this case? Why do you feel it was so bad?
That's a tricky area.
I'm almost certain she was put up to it by her parents.
Well, apparently the mother has now made another complaint.
Mother's made another complaint? Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that she wants her younger daughter to go to the same school.
And also, by the way, the judge upheld the decision of the school to suspend her for her rude behaviour.
That's right, against other pupils. The one thing which is very encouraging is that I've always feared that the judiciary is drifting leftwards and political decisions.
This was a real victory for common sense.
Exactly, a real victory for the independent common sense.
We have to love you and leave you, gentlemen. I'm so sorry. Thank you for joining us today. It's never enough time. Still to come, best-selling author Lionel Shriver is going to join us in the studio. We'll be asking what she thinks of Catherine Birbal Singh's victory. Don't go anywhere. Britain's Newsroom, GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Children's stories like Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland now come with a trigger warning at universities, alerting readers to possible themes of white supremacy.
Yes, these warnings are being applied to colonial narratives. That's the claim, commonly found in adventure stories and famous novels from the Victorian era. Well, joining us now is the actor Charlie Lawson. And Charlie, these warnings have been applied to Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland. What's this university getting at?
Well, look, first of all, this is nothing new. We hadn't heard about it for a while. Universities have been doing this over the last couple of years. I remember having a chat with one of your colleagues. But when Gabriella, the lovely Gabby, phoned me up today, I had to beg her to put me on after 9 o'clock because I found myself getting rather irate about the whole thing. But I will do my best to be very polite.
Yes, keep it clean.
Yes, look, which is quite difficult for me, as you'll appreciate, over this subject. Look, this is universities just jumping on the same trying to be relevant bandwagon. Is it any wonder that we look at the quality of graduates from university, and in my humble opinion, some of them are slightly disappointing. But I did phone a couple of people I knew who had sons and daughters at various leading universities, and they had been speaking this morning. And thank the Lord, they think it's a complete load of bloody nonsense, as I do. Give the C.S. Lewis Centre a ring in East Belfast, because that's where your man came from. And I think you'll find you'll get short shrift, because we're not all about that in East Belfast. We don't censor anything.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Don't forget it's Prime Minister's Questions at midday, and as always, Chris Hope and Gloria Tapiero want your questions for the Prime Minister. Email them in.
In fact, it's not email anymore.
It's not email anymore. No, it isn't.
GBNews.com/your say.
That's right.
Now, the very latest news headlines with Tatiana.
Good morning. The top stories this hour. First, some breaking news. Actor Hugh Grant has settled his privacy lawsuit claim against the publisher of The Sun. The actor claimed News Group newspapers used private investigators to tap his phone and burgle his house to get private information. Prince Harry is among several high-profile figures separately suing the newspaper group for alleged unlawful information gathering, which the publisher of The Sun denies. The Supreme Court has ruled that the UK's trade union law does breach workers' rights and encourages unfair and unreasonable conduct by employers. The case centred on Fiona Mercer, a care worker who was suspended for participating in a strike in 2019. This morning, 5 justices unanimously ruled the law breaches the UK's duties over the right to take part in lawful strikes and had a complete absence of protection for union members. Campaigners have hailed today's decision as a significant victory. The Post Office Chief Executive Nick Reed has been exonerated of all misconduct allegations following an independent investigation into the Horizon IT scandal. In a statement, the Post Office Board said Mr Reed has their full and united backing to continue to lead the business and said allegations will always be thoroughly and consistently investigated, whoever they're aimed at. It comes as an inquiry is continuing into the Post Office scandal, which saw sub-postmasters wrongly convicted after they were accused of stealing money that had gone missing. And the rate of inflation's fallen to its lowest level in 2.5 years, which the Prime Minister says shows the government's plan is working. Figures from the ONS show it eased to 3.2% in March compared to 3.4% the month before. Economists say a dip in food prices is the main reason for the slowdown. Furniture and household goods prices also contributed to the fall. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has welcomed the news, saying people should start to feel the difference as well as see it in their paychecks. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2471 and €1.1716 euros. The price of gold is £1,917 and 20 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,861 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
7:35 with Britain's Newsroom and GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. Don't forget, we've got Prime Minister's Questions coming up. Rishi Sunak going to Prime Minister's Questions. I think we can see him on his way. There he is. He's got inflation figures falling. That's in his interest. He'll be attacking on Angela Rayner. But, of course, I imagine the Labour leader will just keep mentioning 2 words: Liz Truss.
That's right. He's back off his Easter holidays, of course. Very happy with himself. There we go. So we will be doing PMQs with Gloria Tapiero and Christopher Hope this afternoon. Now, very excited to say, in the studio we have a very special guest, best-selling author and journalist Lionel Shriver, the author of this new book, Mania. And we were looking at some of the reviews of this so far, Lionel, and my particular favourite is from the I website, which said that it reads like an outburst on GB News.
Badge of honour.
It's a badge of honour for all of us.
Yes.
Right?
I think so. But just tell our viewers who obviously haven't maybe read it yet, and no doubt will buy it having heard that, why does this reviewer consider this to be thematically in line with the topics we talk about in this channel?
Well, it's clearly a big poke at woke. And that could have been an alternative title. The concept is to get behind what I perceive as a series of social manias that we've suffered over the course of only 10 years. I would say the transgenderism craze, Me Too, the COVID lockdowns and all the sub-manias over the mask and the vaccines, Black Lives Matter, and I would argue also at this point the climate hysteria.
Okay.
And so I decided go back to 2011 before any of this stuff happened, and I'm going to make up my own mania to substitute for all those. So, but in the process, I'm basically goading everyone who went along with every single one of them, and they're all the same people.
Because it's a sort of parody to some degree. It's the satire kind of runs through this, and this is my holiday reading for next week, so I've only got through the first few pages, but instantly, because I'm so familiar with your work, I knew where you were going with it. And this area, this period of time, particularly the last 4 years, has been so rich for satire because it felt like the world went mad. But when you take that to a publisher, because cancel culture is so strong now, how did they respond? Did you have to sort of get it under the radar a little?
I think I'm in an unusually fortunate position. HarperCollins is historically, especially in the most recent past, much more Catholic, small c, in relation to a breadth of ideology in the books, and it's because they've stood behind me and continue to publish me that I haven't ever been cancelled.
Yeah.
And if we had a little more of that kind of bravery at the top and on an institutional level, we wouldn't have cancel culture.
You've done some really powerful opinion pieces as well in national newspapers, which have gathered criticism, and people are very keen now to put you in a box politically. Have your politics changed significantly over the last 4 years, would you say?
Not vastly. I mean, certainly post-lockdown, I've become more cynical about so-called liberal democracy, and also about the human race in general. You will clearly get on board with anything and believe anything. But otherwise, I don't think my politics have seriously changed since I was 16 years old. I was relatively left-wing, an American Democrat, but the Democratic Party and the entire what we now call progressive movement has steadily moved left. I've stayed in the same place, and now I'm left. Lo and behold, I'm a conservative.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's not to my advantage in literature right now.
So you're saying that the culture changed, you stayed
yes.
where you largely were. Can we ask you, talking about bravery, can we ask you about this story that's on the front page of the papers today about Catherine Birbalsingh, the head teacher, who was bullied effectively by a pupil in the school to change her policy around a prayer room, a Muslim-specific prayer room at lunchtime. And she won this. We all expected her to lose.
It's kind of depressing that we expected her to lose.
So what is that a victory for, do you think?
Yeah, the hesitation it tells you everything, because when we're talking about Muslims, we're a little anxious. You know, are we going to say something wrong? And I think this is a group that has made itself dangerous for outsiders to comment on. And we have given them special privileges as a consequence. And that's why we expected her to lose. Oh, this is about Muslim civil rights, and therefore, of course, Muslims are going to prevail. But actually, this is a rare instance where oh, this is a secular school, and then they have the right to say, no, we don't have prayer in a secular school. And you obey by our rules.
Just to interrupt, do you think Muslim civil rights now outweigh Christian civil rights, Jewish civil rights?
Clearly. It's because of the fear factor, right? Nobody's afraid of Christians.
No.
They don't blow things up.
And it's also really important to say that obviously not all Muslims blow things up.
Yes.
A tiny minority.
A very, very tiny
but
portion
we
of
don't
those
even
people.
have a tiny minority who's blowing things up. And you know, Christians don't have a reputation for being bullshit.
We had a great guest on yesterday, didn't we, from, I think it was the Islam Society of Oxford.
Islam Institute of Oxford, I think.
Thank you. And he was saying he was very much in support of this victory for Catherine Birbalsingh, and he said we need to draw a very clear distinction between the religion of Islam and what it says in the Quran and culture, which is transplanted here, particularly in terms of women being second-class citizens, having to cover their heads, etc. But that is so rare to hear anybody say that, particularly on a mainstream media channel like GB News. Why can't we say that, Lionel? And what do you want to achieve through your writing to make that more possible?
Well, I'm, by and large, a big advocate of freedom of speech, which used to be the most boring thing in the world.
Didn't
to defend, right? And now suddenly it's edgy. And the way I defend freedom of speech is to write whatever I want and to put it out there, even if it gets me into trouble. And, you know, the concept of this book, in that we have create a world where suddenly it's we believe that everyone is equally smart, right?
Yeah.
So, because I think the left is obsessed with equality to the disparagement of all other qualities. Everything has to be fair. We're all the same. Well, we're not all the same. So, my poke at woke, my poke at the left, is in some ways a defense of freedom of speech, because in modern fiction right now, you don't have right-of-center opinions represented at all.
No. And no, so one of the worst things you could be in this book is brain vain, which I love. So brain vain, basically thinking it's okay to be clever.
Right.
And you have to assume that you can't prize any sort of intellectual brilliance over anybody else.
Yes, and we in universities, we had the de-cleverization of the curriculum.
So the book is Mania by Lionel Shriver, and I promise you, if you like GB News, you will very much like this. It's such a pleasure to see you. Thank you so much for coming in. Right.
Great. It's a great cover, by the way.
We were talking about, yes, it's the melting brain. If you say, what's that?
That is a great cover.
Ice cream in a sort of dunce's hat, and this is
that's very clever.
like brain matter, and it's melting. You can't see it, so you're going to have to buy it to have a closer look at it. Thank you so much, Lionel Shriver. Now, still to come, are dating apps ruining romance?
Why are you looking at me?
Do you have a dog in this fight?
No.
We're going to be debating that next with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Most places having a fine, bright day out there. It's on the chilly side. There are some showers, particularly in the east, and we have this weather system just trickling southwards, bringing some rain to parts of Northern Ireland. So staying fairly grey and damp here, and across the eastern parts of England especially. It is still gusty, with a cold wind blowing and a fair few showers drifting in. 1 or 2 scattered showers for Wales and northern Scotland, but many places will just be dry and bright with some decent spells of sunshine. But the breeze is still coming down from the north, not as strong as recent days, but it's fresh out there. Temperatures a touch below average for most, and feeling pretty cold in the east with those showers and under the thicker cloud and rain across Northern Ireland. That will spread to South Wales, South West England this evening, so turning a little damp for a time. More showers to come for Lincolnshire, East Anglia and the south east overnight, and northern Scotland too, where skies stay clear and the winds are light. Southern Scotland, northern England, Wales, parts of the Midlands. We will see a touch of frost in rural spots. Towns and cities mostly holding a degree or so above freezing, but certainly a cold start to Thursday. But a fine sunny start for most of England and Wales. Rain across the Highlands will spread to most of Scotland by lunchtime, and we'll see some of that rain affecting the north and east of Northern Ireland, spreading into northern England and North Wales later on. But much of the south staying dry and bright, and here the top temperatures, we could reach 15 Celsius. Bye for now.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive?
Incompetent? That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Well, have dating apps ruined a generation's love lives? They haven't ruined mine.
Do you know what a dating app is?
Not really.
Well, to discuss
Do you know how many apps I've got on my phone?
You don't even know how to use WhatsApp. Psychologist and social commentator Dr. Pam Spur and the co-founder of Wax social dating app, Emma Sale. Good morning, ladies. We're very short on time, but Pam, let's come to you. Have dating apps ruined the romantic world?
No, they haven't ruined the romantic world. If you look at Imperial College research from last year, it showed that 33% of relationships, recent relationships, had started online. That did include dating apps, dating websites, and just flirting on, social media platforms like X. But as a psychologist, I'm very aware that some people are susceptible to the dopamine hits they get when they're scrolling their dating app and they see someone has tapped them or swiped them or whatever. And that dopamine hit can be very addictive if people don't have good quality self-regulation, as psychologists call it. So if you're not aware of that, you're now spending too much time, you're getting too many of these hits, and you're really getting drained in the rest of your life, then you are prone to that sort of addiction. But on the whole, I'd say, with the 20 years I've been date coaching, seeing this revolution that many people are successfully finding love online, and you just have to be aware of the people out there catfishing.
Well, Emma Sale, you've just launched Wax Social, a new dating app. A, how is it different? And B, doesn't it depend on people being addicted to the dopamine hits?
Yeah, I mean, we launched it off the back of doing in real life in-person events for 19 years. So to us, we've launched it with very much the dating app part, the swipe, that kind of part is the tool to get people to actually meet in real life. So, well, we call it sort of responsible dating. So actually it's having it as, we live in a digital world. So it's having the digital tool that then enables people to, we've got massive chat groups on there. We've got the education side of it. We've got big events listings. So that's why we call it a social dating app, because the key bit is the social part of it. So, but, the whole ruining lives, at the end of the day, I think Instagram, TikTok, all the social media, X, all the social media out there, if you've got that addictive personality and that's in you to be, and I've seen, friends of mine are like, they're just addicted to scrolling through Instagram, to scrolling through Facebook. It's all addictive. Technology is addictive.
So,
Pam,
maybe if you are going to be on your phone, maybe looking for the love of your life is not a bad way to use that addiction.
Oh, it's a good way to look. And that's why I love the apps, because it's 24/7. So if you're a busy person during the day and you've got time at 9 p.m. or later, you can go on. What I advise my date coaching clients is select a couple prime apps that suit your needs. Like the one I write for, Wingman app, you use your best friend to do your profile, to sing your praises and to help you through. Also to time limit how much time you spend at once. And that way you can try and hopefully avoid the addictive nature of it.
OK, brilliant. Pam, Emma, thank you so much. I'm so sorry we were short on time. Here is your weather. Don't forget PMQs in just a minute.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Most places having a fine, bright day out there. It's on the chilly side. There are some showers, particularly in the east, and we have this weather system just trickling southwards, bringing some rain to parts of Northern Ireland. So staying fairly grey and damp here and across the eastern parts of England especially. It is still gusty with a cold wind blowing and a fair few showers drifting in. 1 or 2 scattered showers for Wales and northern Scotland, but many places will just be dry and bright with some decent spells of sunshine. But the breeze is still coming down from the north, not as strong as recent days, but it's fresh out there. Temperatures a touch below average for most and feeling pretty cold in the east with those showers and under the thicker cloud and rain across Northern Ireland. That will spread to South Wales, South West England this evening, so turning a little damp for a time. More showers to come for Lincolnshire, East Anglia and the south east overnight, and northern Scotland too, where skies stay clear and the winds are light. Southern Scotland, northern England, Wales, parts of the Midlands. We will see a touch of frost in rural spots Towns and cities mostly holding a degree or so above freezing, but certainly a cold start to Thursday. But a fine sunny start for most of England and Wales. Rain across the Highlands will spread to most of Scotland by lunchtime, and we'll see some of that rain affecting the north and east of Northern Ireland, spreading into Northern England and North Wales later on. But much of the south staying dry and bright, and here the top temperatures, we could reach 15 Celsius. Bye for now.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
SUV drivers in Oxford will face higher parking charges. Proposals tabled by the local Green Party or passed by the City Council. The motion argues that heavier cars like SUVs cause more damage to roads, are more likely to seriously injure or kill pedestrians, and cause more illnesses due to pollution. However, the Alliance of British Drivers has condemned the plan as absolutely outrageous. Well, let's get the thoughts now of the legendary motoring journalist, Quentin Wilson. Quentin, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. We hear a lot about the war on motorists, this time targeting SUVs because of their weight, and the charges could be astronomical. This idea first started in Paris. Now it's coming to Oxford. Can you tell us a bit about how it would work?
OK, so the idea is that the charges will penalise people who